Well, welcome to Module 9, titled Export Cargo, Packing, Marking and Shipment Considerations. Today's lecture discusses one of the most important aspects of preparing an export consignment. That is, the need to ensure that it's well packaged to withstand the ordinary shocks of handling at the various points of transfer during the entire transport leg. In today's trading environment, it's increasingly becoming necessary that freight forwarders' oversight of packaging of an international shipment meets the requirements set by carriers, the buyer, and government regulations. For instance, extensive quarantine regulation in Australia means that when wood products and straw are used in packaging materials, it must be processed in some form, fumigated or kiln-dried, and accompanied by appropriate certification to that effect. Now, failure to meet this requirement will usually lead to a refusal of entry by Australian customs authorities. From the perspective of all parties, packaging must be able to provide adequate protection to the goods to minimise or avoid costs. Considering these requirements and the fact that improper packaging could be used as a reason to refuse payment for damaged imported goods, the freight forwarder must ensure that the pertinent interests of all parties connected to the export consignment are met during packaging and preparation of the goods for shipment. Module 9 provides considerable insight into how international consignments are prepared for export by examining the types of packaging available for goods and the factors that must be considered when packing goods for transport. The module concludes by highlighting the critical steps involved in the preparation of dangerous goods for export. So our focus questions today are: what are the main factors influencing the nature of packaging for an international consignment? What are the key types of packaging available for the shipment of export consignments? And what is dangerous cargo, and how is it prepared for transport? Our readings are from Murphy and Burke. So the first focus question I want to discuss today is: what are the main factors influencing the nature of packaging for an international consignment? So when we talk about international consignments and considering packaging and how goods are moved, a good starting place is to look at the different forms of cargo, how cargo can be divided, if you like, for the purposes of movement by water, for example. Now, in this instance, it can be divided into two main groups: packed general cargo and unpacked bulk cargo. So when we look at bulk cargo, that consists of goods that are pre-packed that must be loaded individually, but not in containers or in bulk. Common types of packaging are going to include bags, barrels, crates, pallets, and boxes. Another form of packed general cargo is what we call neo-bulk. Now, this comprises of goods that are not pre-packaged and is often made up of separate and large items, counted as they're loaded and unloaded. Common types of packaging used are lumber, paper, steel, trucks and trailers. And the third form of general cargo is unitized cargo, and this refers to goods packaged together before transportation and includes containers as well as pallets. Now, the second major category of marine cargo is what we call unpacked bulk cargo, which is made up of liquid bulk, which is a form of commodity cargo that is transported unpackaged in large quantities, and it refers to materials in either liquid or granular form, particulate form, as a mass of relatively small solids. Common types of cargo include petroleum, gasoline, LNG, chemicals, juice, and wine. The other form is what we call dry bulk. Now, this commodity cargo is of solid, dry material. Common types of cargo are going to include coal, grain, iron ore, bauxite, and cement. So, when we consider packaging for international consignments, we're talking about decisions about the types of materials to be used for the containment, protection, handling, delivery, and presentation of goods to ensure that they arrive in a pristine condition. Now, the major packaging considerations include product characteristics, which includes dealing with products in three forms: solid form, liquid form, and also gas, many of which are covered by some form of international regulation and that respond quite differently depending on the weather conditions. Another major packaging consideration is protection. Now, that's protection not only of the contents of the package itself, but to protect other items from them. And also, the package itself presents no hazard to the handlers. In other words, the handlers are protected as well. Another packaging consideration relates to promotion. Promotion is an opportunity to advertise on the outside of the packaging and also on the inside of the overall package as well. A major consideration in regards to packing is identification, which refers to having the correct marking and labelling to ensure the consignment reaches its destination. And finally, a growing packaging consideration is that of environmental protection. And this is mainly due to changing consumer expectations, as well as increasing government regulation to minimise the impact on the environment of packaging materials. It's also worth noting in this context that the type of packaging and packing methods are also strongly influenced by the carrier's tariff. So, if we look a little bit deeper and a little bit closer to each of those characteristics, the first area I wanted to look at related to product characteristics, so physical aspects. Now, that includes sizes, shape, density, and that's going to inform the type of packaging. Weight is also important when ensuring a uniform distribution. Product form, such as perishables, require some form of specialist treatment, as will live products like seafood. Chemical properties such as incompatibility of various product categories need to be considered. So, for example, certain fruits and vegetables should not be stored together in close quarters due to the impact of the gases they emit. Also, consumers are becoming more demanding in regards to knowledge of a product's ingredient, and government is responding by imposing more strict regulation designed to identify the origin of the product. Another product characteristic that needs to be considered relates to hazardous cargo. International regulations cover the movement of goods that have hazardous properties or change under certain conditions. The movement of goods deemed hazardous requires specific labelling, packaging and documentation. Another key packaging consideration relates to protection. So, securing the cargo refers to minimising any undesired movements when the container is in transit, and requires that the cargo is positioned to provide protection given the various sizes and shapes it may take. Stabilising the container requires that the contents should be separated to prevent any undesired contact that can and also cushion the contents from outside vibrations and shocks is done correctly. In addition, inside the container, identical packages need to support the weight of those packages that are stacked above it. Protection in regard to ensuring visual recognition refers to the freight forwarder providing enough exterior surface area for identification and shipping labels, as well as ensuring that the packages or the container is tamper-proof to the extent that evidence of tampering can be noticed. Now, packaging also performs a role in regards to promotion. So, from a sales orientation perspective, with the growth of mass merchandising in big box store formats, a corresponding reduction in the number of salespeople, for many products this means that customers can only examine the printing and pictures on closed-up cartons, which is limiting sales communication. Hence, in some cases, depending on the retail format, displaying some advertising on the outside of the box may actually assist in making the sale. Customer expectations in regards to promotion. So, where the package is used to reinforce marketing benefits such as luxury and quality, expectations in high-priced products. So, for example, Tasmanian cherry grower Reed Fruits markets its cherries on the basis high quality, and its packaging matches that promise. Promotion in regards to packaging has the potential to extend product recognition. So for new products, by using packaging with similar surface design and symbols or colours, and supporting promotional materials as others under the corporate brand, may enable the consumers to become familiar with the brand, who are familiar with the brand, and it could lead to some form of sales acceptance. Now, a firm using this approach should be mindful that for higher priced products, The last thing that they want to do is attract pilferage en route to the destination if it is too overt with what it communicates outside the packaging. Now, given the multitude of packages that there are in transit each day, the probability of packaging being misplaced means that clear and prominent markings on the cargo is essential. Packaging's considerations in regard to identification is usually associated with the following choices. In the first instance, labels. So, once the material is packed, placed in the box and the cover is closed, it's necessary to label the box. And using a label is the most common packaging identification. Whether the label is in words or code numbers depends on the nature of the product and its vulnerability to pilferage. Labels are very versatile, some being able to be read by optical scanners, for example, and it could also include things such as batch numbers for specialist packaging such as food and drug products to assist with traceability. The use of the International Standards Organization, ISO, pictorial symbols to indicate characteristics and hazards to be mindful of for a specific shipment is highly recommended, particularly if you're dealing with goods going to a country with an uncommon language. So there also could be some literacy barriers at the destination. In transit ports through which the goods will travel, the importance of pictorial symbols and foreign language marking becomes self-evident. Another option when it comes to identification is the idea of barcoding. It's widely used in identification because it usually can deliver some additional benefits and being able to be read by scanners and sensors. Scanners often do more than signal the presence of a container or part. They also give the computer more information in regards to the whereabouts of the package and it enables the maintenance of accurate production and inventory records and will generally assist in routing the product from one workstation to another, which is one of those important characteristics of just-in-time inventory control. Another form of identification is RFID, which is abbreviated from the wording radio frequency identification. So this is a form of identification based on computer chips and allows information contained on those chips to be updated as they move through the supply chain. Over the years, price has been prohibitive, but for those firms that have adopted RFID, it has enabled them to not only cut costs, but also improve on waste and also theft. Another growing packaging consideration relates to environmental protection. So, and this is in many ways driven by changing consumer expectations, that the growing public concern for environmental protection has had a significant impact on packaging materials used and handling practices. Many materials used in packaging can be recycled, and as a consequence, the use of non-biodegradable packaging materials is often viewed as wasteful. And in addition to that, it's becoming increasingly expensive to dispose of that material as costs increase for dumping at landfill sites. Now, one of the, areas around the world that is leading the way in regards to legislation in regards to environmental protection is the European Union. So European legislation has been a key driver to improve waste management, to stimulate innovation in recycling, to limit the use of landfilling, and also to create incentives to change consumer behaviour. However, I think that the main issue with it progressing only to a particular point is complicated by the lack of global convention on packaging, resulting in freight forwarders dealing with laws that might vary from one country or region to the other. Now, when it comes to environmental packaging strategies, this relates to firms choosing to reduce the amount of packaging materials used where even one element of the package is removed is likely to make a difference. Another option is to use environmentally friendly packaging materials such as recycled containers. Now, both of those approaches are recognised positively by the consumer and is having a positive effect on sales in some cases. Many international firms are using the increased consumer interest in environmental protection to position themselves as promoting their green credentials. So, for example, a sporting company like Nike are very overt with their positive impact on the environment. So they state on their website that they deliver products for maximum performance with minimum impact, and state that they have a 10% reduction in the average environmental footprint. They increasingly use more sustainable materials in their footwear and apparel, and as well as eliminating footwear manufacturing waste to landfill and incineration, while continuing to reduce overall waste. So when it comes to major packaging considerations of product characteristics, protection, promotion, identification and environmental protection that I've just spoken about, relating to a freight forwarder, places them in a position to prioritise their efforts in this regard using the following factors. Firstly, when it comes to the nature of the cargo, where in addition to the size, weight and density of the products, issues such as perishability, potential to rust, whether the goods are hygroscopic in nature, in other words, tending to absorb moisture, or products that are dangerous or hazardous, such as batteries or biological goods, and be subject to transit prohibitions. Another consideration for the freight forwarder is the choice of mode of transport. Now, whether it's sea, air, road or rail, and the chosen method of carrying the packaging goods, whether in a container as a less than container load or a full container load, or if unpackaged or packaged general cargo, it should be recognised that transport modes have a large deal of influence on the specifications for packing the goods themselves. Another key issue for the freight forwarder is the issue that relates to hazards encountered on the journey, which refers to the negative impact of shock and vibration from rolling and pitching in the sea, or rough handling by forklifts of cranes, perhaps open air storage of the goods at ports and container depots, poor stowage in containers and in warehouses, as well as temperature and humidity changes resulting in condensation in containers. Another consideration for the freight forward is this idea of theft. So the possibility of theft, options to mitigate this include utilising specialist service offered by airlines and other modes, perhaps using plain packaging, using generic descriptions to avoid advertising to thieves, using lockable cases for some types of goods, scheduling for late drop-off, early drop-off of cargo at transport terminals to minimise the time that the cargo has to sit for long periods unguarded, being some of the options available to the freight forwarder. The freight forwarder also needs to be mindful of the importing country laws. Also needs to be considered as some countries prohibit certain types of packaging, and some countries require quarantine treatment of materials derived from plants such as wood, wool, straw, sawdust and bark. And finally, in making preparations for packaging and packing, the freight forwarder shouldn't underestimate cost. It's a critical consideration, and quite often packaging becomes a cost-benefit debate, where the exporter may believe it is acceptable to keep the packaging at the lowest cost as possible, as long as the condition of the goods upon delivery are not compromised by its packaging and stowage. However, this can be quite a fine line. Okay, so we're going to leave packaging there for the moment in terms of considerations of packaging and major influences and priorities. And we're going to move to the second question, which is, what are the key types of packaging available for shipment of export consignments? So when it comes to packages and methods of conveying cargo in use, it's worth noting that this area is under continual review into more efficient and safer and less wasteful methods of protecting and handling cargo during transit. So I want to start by discussing the main forms of packaging for cargo, most of which you're likely to be familiar with. So the first one I want to mention are bags. Bags made from plastics, paper, textiles are used extensively in the trade to transport a wide range of powders and granular type goods, such as flours, seeds, plastic resins, phosphates, good ingredients, powdered milk. I guess one consideration in this process is if carrying hygroscopic substances, they should be designed to avoid water penetration. Plastic sheets are often used to separate rows of palletized bags to prevent tearing, scraping and breakages, as they're quite fragile in nature. Bales are also suitable where the product permits pressure and compression. It's ideal for clothing, textiles, and it's a standard unit of wool. It's very common in used clothing trades from other continents to Africa. However, it's highly vulnerable to pilferage or damage where a hook is concerned. Now, if you're transporting bales outside of a container, it requires consideration of waterproofing to avoid wetting of the cargo. Now, standard cartons are the most widely used type of packaging type due to being light in weight and also very economical in terms of cost. Now, while not suitable for all goods, destinations or applications, when mounted on pallets to reinforce and facilitate handling, they're very versatile indeed. However, inner waterproof material may be needed in situations where groundwater or other moisture could be an influence, which could easily happen at many ports worldwide. Cool storage of cartons are sandwiched with high-density foams with high insulating factor. And this is particularly useful when shipping perishables, chemicals, and foodstuffs. It involves pre-chilling of the outer package is usually needed, and although this particular approach can be expensive, they're often reusable, and it's got the benefit of remaining cool for up to a week if pre-cooled prior to use. Now, casks and drums are another option, made from a variety of materials such as plastic, metal, wood, generally used for liquids, but also for granules and powders. The main commodities include chemicals, whiskey, detergent, oil, paints, some ores, and even scrap metal. If hydroscopic cardboard and fiberboard drums are used instead of metal and plastic drums, they need to be protected against moisture. And if loading and unloading when not palletized, they will usually require some form of specialized forklift truck. Another option in terms of packaging is, cases and crates. Cases and crates are generally built of a lightweight wood such as plywood or fiberboard. However, depending on the weight of the product, metal or hard timber wood could be used. Products are usually enclosed in the case and are strengthened by bracing battens and metal corner angle strips, as you can see in the photograph there. Crates, on the other hand, are of skeletal construction, so they don't provide the same degree of protection as cases. Crates are suitable for large machinery where the main risk is forklift blade penetration. Finally, I just want to talk about some of the main methods of conveying cargo. And I want to start off with pallets. So pallets are the most widely used accessory worldwide for loading and conveying cargo, constructed mainly out of wood, metal, and plastic. Pallets come in different sizes that could either be two-way or four-way entry for forklifts. And the standard size is ISO 1200 by 1000 mil. Now, there's a number of considerations in regard to pallet use, such as the need to fumigate wooden pallets on arrival in some countries, such as Australia. Also, that metallic pallets are prone to rust. Loads should be shrink-wrapped or fixed with nets. And before use, consideration of the weight of the cargo is required to ensure the strength of the pallet is adequate. Now, I just want to spend a little bit of time identifying some of the containers that are available. The influence of the container cannot be underestimated. Particularly, it's important to multimodalism and intermodal carriage of cargo. So depending on the nature of the cargo, the transit route, and the ultimate destination of the container, the freight forwarder is required to decide on a general purpose dry container in either 20 foot, 40 foot length, or a specialised container fit for purpose. And I just want to have a look at some of the options. So the one that you can see on the screen there is commonly referred to as a dry van. It's the world's most widely used container for the movement of general cargo, and its most cost-effective means of transporting non-perishable cargoes. It's ideal for both full container load or LCL, less than container load markets, and it's designed for all types of general merchandise. It comes in 20 foot and 40 foot lengths, as well as 40 foot and 45 foot high cube sizes. Another common container is the reefer container, and that's designed to operate independently of a blown air refrigeration system, and are filled with their own refrigeration unit, which require an electrical power supply for operation. Each container is capable of being set at its own individual temperature, and it's ideal for perishables, whether it's meat, dairy, fruit, or vegetables. The open side container is a variation of the dry van container. Comes in two main sizes, the 20 foot and 40 foot sizes. It has the addition of doors that can change into completely open sides, providing a much wider room for loading of materials. The swap body is growing in usage, particularly in Europe, where it is quite competitive for sea transport. Its design is tailored to meet the specific operational requirements for the carriage of palletised cargo. Laden units can be stacked either 2 or 3 high, depending on the container's length, and can be easily transferred between a rail wagon and a truck, and between a truck and a barge to complete the overland journey. Now, bulk containers are designed for the carriage of dry powders and granular substances in bulk. Top loading using 3 circular hatches with 500 mil diameter in the roof structure is a common feature. Another option is a ventilated container, similar to the dry freight container, specifically modified with the inclusion of a full-length ventilation galleries sited along the top and bottom side rails. This allows for passive ventilation of the cargo, and it's ideal for products such as coffee. The flat rack type of container is designed to facilitate the carriage of cargo that's awkward, oversized, or project cargoes. Ideal for trade routes where the cargo is one direction and nothing to return, which allows the units to be stacked on each other for the return leg, minimising the taking up of space. Now, a variation on that is a flat rack with collapsible end. It facilitates the carriage as the previous one with awkward, oversized and project cargoes. But it can also act as a temporary between deck for carriage of large, indivisible loads. They have collapsible spring and assisted walls, which allows for easier operation, enabling both wheeled and crawled equipment to be driven onto the unit during loading. Finally, tank containers are ideal for the transport and storage of all types of bulk liquid and can be shipped by all surface modes, whether it's rail, road or sea. There are a range of specialist tanks available to meet most applications, such as an International Maritime Organization, or IMO, as it's referred to, type for chemicals involving hazardous cargo. Also, lightweight tanks designed for a range of chemical and bulk liquids, food-grade tanks for edible cargo, insulated tanks for liquids which are non-heat sensitive, and special tanks for highly hazardous liquids and gases. So I just want to finish off this section by providing a checklist of 6 key considerations and processes that should be followed when requesting, receiving, stowing, sealing and dispatching of containers. The first on the checklist is making packing plans. So I guess the important thing here is that most international shipments would benefit from preparation of a container packing plan. In this particular type of situation, the sizes, the weights and type of goods that are loaded, the matching points in the container, the payload limit, the lashing points, and other aspects that influence the container choice are all predetermined. Second on the checklist of considerations and processes is to check in with the customer before finalising the stowage of cargo into the container, just to check that the customer, the buyer at the other end of the transaction, can accept and unload the container without any unexpected delay or additional cost arising, particularly if relying on an Inco term such as DPU, delivered, place, unloaded, where the seller assumes all the costs and risks associated with bringing the goods to the named international destination and risk transfers when the goods have been unloaded at the named place. A third consideration in regards to that should be given some level of priority in regards to container is choosing the right container for the shipment. And usually that involves considering issues relevant to the cargo. So does the cargo itself need any form of ventilation? Does it require refrigeration? Now, if it does, it's likely to pre-select a reefer container, for example, versus, say, a dry van. Or um, ensuring that the container that you choose is consistent with the government regulation, particularly if you're moving dangerous goods. A fourth consideration and potential process is to undertake an inspection process. So to inspect the external outside of the container, a visual inspection to identify any existing damage which might impact negatively on the freight itself. So are there any dents, holes, tears in the container structure? Do the doors work? Do the locking bars lock? And are the hinges in working order? Once you've completed the external pre-stowing check of the container, you then should spend some time looking at the internal elements of the container itself. So what we're talking about there is opening up the container, checking for any offensive smells which might impact negatively on your products. Are there any residues such as soil, grease and oil from previous shipments, as well as water? Is there any water in there? Could there be a possibility of a condensation problem? As well as no infestations of rodents or insects. Now, the final aspect in regards to stowing the cargo in the container includes factors such as load distribution, placement, and center of gravity. For example, the cargo load should be as evenly distributed as practicable, both laterally and longitudinally, to avoid any issues with tilting. Also, bracing, cushioning, and preventing of chafing and scratching of the cargo can be minimised by having no void spaces that allow the cargo to move and be damaged or cause damage to other goods. Another consideration relates to cross-contamination of incompatible cargo, and this can occur between different types of cargo, particularly dangerous goods and also perishable goods. Also, care is required not to place heavy goods on top of lightweight goods or goods that are easily crushed. Another consideration relates to safety concerns regarding cargo stowed near doors. So this requires that the cargo near the doors are properly secured so that no accidents occur when the container doors are open at the destination. And finally, prevention of sweating and condensation problems can be achieved by taking a number of approaches. It could be to check that if there are any vents to assist in this process, that they're not obstructed. Using only dry dunnage and pallets. Also using desiccants can also be used to absorb moisture en route to assist eliminating moisture. Also taking care when loading containers on rainy days or in otherwise humid conditions. Okay, so that brings us to our final question today, which is, what is dangerous cargo and how is it prepared for transportation? So the International Maritime Organization, or commonly referred to as IMO, is a United Nations specialist agency. Over time, it's developed international legislation, called the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code, which we're going to refer to as the IMDG Code, that contains provisions for the safe carriage of dangerous goods by sea. Now, IMDG's code regulations are based on recommendations which have been developed by the United Nations and published in the UN recommendations on the transport of dangerous goods model regulations. The regulations themselves provide a uniform framework of rules for the safe transport of dangerous goods by all modes, whether it's using air, road, rail, as well as sea. So their consideration goes beyond sea transport. The key objectives of this regulation is first and foremost to protect human life, to prevent marine pollution, and to facilitate the free movement of dangerous goods. Now, the IMDG code has got a classification system, and that classification system defines what a dangerous good is and what form they take. And according to the IMDG code, dangerous goods are substances or articles which can pose a threat to people, property, and the environment. Now, dangerous goods exist in three forms, three physical forms, as a solid, a liquid, or a gas, and can present a range of dangers in the transport environment, such things as flammability, toxicity, in other words, poisonous, and corrosivity being the most common dangers. The physical state of cargo products and their properties can have significant ramifications on packing, handling, and transport decisions. Many dangerous goods are essential in the manufacture of other products, so cars, plastics, electronics, and pharmaceuticals, on which progress, in a general sense, and world trade depend. So it requires that they are transported globally and safely to meet the expectation and timelines of global value chains, which require those ingredients. Now, dangerous goods are categorised in the IMDG code into 9 classes, and within each of the 9 classes, the dangerous goods are uniquely identified by 2 pieces of information. The first piece is a UN number, which is a 4-digit number which is preceded by the letter UN. The second piece of information is what's called a PSN, and this is the corresponding proper shipping name, PSN. An example of this would be kerosene, is identified in the IMDG code by its UN number 1223 and the PSN kerosene. So when completing documentation and labelling in reference to the particular type of product, it would be UN 1223 PSN kerosene. So, under the IMDG code classification system, the classes of dangerous goods are listed as follows: explosives, gases, flammable liquids, flammable solids, oxidizing substances and organic peroxides, toxic and infectious substances, radioactive material, corrosive substances, and miscellaneous dangerous substances and articles. And as you can see on the slide, each class of dangerous goods has got one or more sign that represents the category and is used in transportation marking outside the packaging, the pallets, or container. So the purpose of the IMDG code classification system is based on three principles. The first principle is to distinguish between the goods which are considered to be dangerous for transport and those that are not, to identify the dangers which are presented by dangerous goods in transport, and to ensure that the correct measures are taken to enable these goods to be transported safely without risk to persons and property. The IMO member governments recognise that safe transport of dangerous goods by sea is dependent upon the appreciation by all the persons involved of the risks involved and on a detailed understanding of IMDG code requirements. So with this in mind, a key element of the role of the IMO in regards to dangerous goods is to create an awareness and education programs involved in the movement of goods for parties such as freight forwarders, and to do so in the form of training. Training requirements apply to all shore-based personnel involved in the shipment of dangerous goods and should receive training commensurate to their responsibilities. So depending on the area that they're involved in regards to the dangerous good, will depend on the level of training. Now, according to the IMDG code, shore-based personnel are the following persons. And these are people who classify dangerous goods and identify proper shipping names, who pack dangerous goods, who mark, label and placard dangerous goods, who load and unload transport units with dangerous goods, who prepare transport documents for dangerous goods, who offer, accept, handle and carry dangerous goods in transport, who prepare dangerous goods loading and storage plants, who load and unload dangerous goods into and from ships, and also those shore-based personnel that enforce, survey, or inspect for compliance within the applicable rules and regulations. So, when it comes to the provision of documentation with dangerous goods, the shipper and agent prepares a document called the Shipper's Declaration of Dangerous Goods, or could be called a Dangerous Goods Note. This document must accompany every package. Now, the Shipper's Declaration of Dangerous Goods should include the unique UN number or identification number, the proper shipping name, PSN, and the class or division of the dangerous good. As part of the regulation, at least 3 copies must be prepared. One for the shipper or freight forwarder, who keeps 1 copy. The carrier takes another 2, and delivers one to the consignee and holds on one himself. The shipper must keep the shipper's declaration at least 2 years and include a date of acceptance by the initial carrier. And that is the end of our lecture today. We went through 3 focus questions. What are the main factors influencing the nature of packaging for an international shipment? What are the key types of packaging available for the shipment of export consignments? And what is dangerous cargo and how is it prepared for transportation? Thanks for listening. Hope to talk to you again next week, and all the best. Bye for now.